The primary attitude is to let Cuba sort out its problems and its challenges on its own, that Latin American countries are eager and willing to welcome back Cuba to the institutionality, if you will, to the inter-American system from which it has been, in some cases, in some bodies, ostracized since the 1960s, but that Latin America is willing and able to let Cuba make its own decisions without imposing any artificial deadlines or any artificial demands as to how that process should move forward. That this means opening up, means democratization, it means a number of things. The fascinating thing about the current state of affairs in Cuba is that as he exits the stage, Fidel has managed once again to defy all prognostications. For a long time, and I'm sure you have heard this, there was one view that after Fidel and post-Cuba Fidel, everything would collapse from one day to the next, and the pre-1959 situation would be quickly restored in a manner, say, not dissimilar to what happened in East Germany once West Germany took over. And you had situations such as former East German immigrants went back to their home in Leipzig, knocked on the door, and told the people inside who had been living there for many years, "Get out, this was my house, and I'm reclaiming it now." And this is, in fact, what happened. The other view, of course, is that 50 years of revolution would not be in vain, that Fidel or not Fidel, the Cuban state in society would hold, and not everything would fall apart. Well, what has happened now, and I find this absolutely fascinating, is something that nobody predicted. Fidel has not passed away, he is still there, but he has taken early retirement, as it were. And an orderly change to a different approach to development in state-society relations is emerging slowly. The jury is still out. We don't know what will happen, but certain changes are taking place. Having said all this, there's little doubt that the main challenge in Cuba today is the economy. Again, contrary to what a lot of people say, and there are some very distinguished economists in this audience, the Cuban economy is not, repeat, not a total shambles. The growth rate from 2000 to 2006, according to ECLAC, was an annual 6.1%. Now, according to most observers, that is not a bad figure to have over a 6-year period. This has been driven mainly by the high price of nickel, the high price of sugar, and of course by Venezuelan oil aid. Some changes have been made. Venezuela, Cuba, with this new situation, is trying to move towards what some call a knowledge economy, with emphasis on things like medical tourism and educational services, although this is still a very small part of this economic activity. Until very recently, I think this has changed over the past couple of years, but until 2005, the investment rate was extremely low. We're talking 9%, which is about half of the Latin American investment rate. Productivity is very low. The basic approach has been to create full employment, which has as one of its side effects the creation of massive underemployment. Thank you. And there are obviously many difficulties to which we will get back. These obstacles can be removed, and according to some observers, this is precisely what the current government under President Raúl Castro is trying to do. But the jury is still out on this, as I said earlier. But an inkling of the many opportunities that Cuba has today and that have not necessarily been present in the past can be seen from two sectors that are two of the most dynamic sectors in the world economy today, and in which there's a lot of activity in Cuba. One of them is, of course, oil and gas. According to the US Geological Survey, there are 5 billion barrels of oil in Cuban waters in the Gulf of Mexico. Drilling will start next year already in new fields. This means that in the short term, Cuba may become totally self-sufficient in energy sources and may even have something left to export. This, of course, changes quite dramatically the situation that exists until now. You have this fascinating situation of a company that has brought together Norwegian, Spanish, and Indian companies together into one consortium that will start drilling off the Florida Straits, and the oil majors from the United States have to watch this impotently with oil at $140 a barrel because of the embargo. Now you can imagine the sort of tensions this creates and the sort of pressure this creates to eventually lift the embargo in the relatively short term. The second, of course, is tourism, and we heard from Minister Bartlett the figures on tourism yesterday and how this is by far the biggest economic activity in the world. Cuba has 2 million tourists, and they are only scratching the surface in terms of what can happen in that regard. A lot of people see, and my fellow political scientists are particularly good at this, identify a lot of contradictions in Cuban society today between, say, Havana and Matanzas on the one hand, and Oriente on the other hand, a much more backward area of the country, between the white population and the Afro-Cuban population, which is as high as 40%, and that has suffered quite a bit under the current restrictions. They see a lot of tensions between the older population. Cuban society has aged quite quickly, and the disaffected and alienated youth. And these tensions, no doubt, exist and are very much there. But on the other hand, it seems to me, it is important not to underestimate the power of Cuban nationalism and of shared experience that it seems to me can be also a very powerful unifying force. And the notion that somehow the social fabric will come asunder because of these tensions and contradictions, it seems to me, ought to be taken again with a grain of salt.